This is completely unacceptable behavior for an officer. You are exceeding your authority, and I will be filing a formal complaint.
Part 1. The Lake House Dream. You ever work your entire life for something, finally get it, and then have some stranger try to rip it away from you in front of everyone you love? That's exactly what happened to me last 4th of July weekend. And honestly, I still get angry just thinking about it. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Marcus. I'm 38 years old. I grew up dirt poor in a small town in South Carolina. My mama worked 2 jobs. My dad left when I was 7. We never had a house with a yard, let alone a lake. Every summer, I'd watch rich kids post pictures from their lake houses, their boats, their cookouts by the water. I told myself that one day that would be me. I worked through college. I worked through grad school. I started a small tech consulting business in my late 20s, and by the time I was 35, it was doing well, really well. Well enough that when a beautiful 5-acre property with a private lake came up for sale just outside of Ridgemont Estates, a gated community in North Carolina, I didn't even hesitate. Now, here's the important detail that changes everything in this story. My property was not inside the Ridgemont Estates HOA. My land bordered the community. The previous owner, an elderly man named Mr. Harold Jennings, had owned that land for over 60 years. It was family land. He sold it to me directly because he said I reminded him of his grandson. We sat on his porch, drank sweet tea, and he handed me the deed with tears in his eyes. "Take care of this land, son," he told me. "Don't let nobody push you off it." I didn't understand the weight of those words until later. The property came with the lake, the entire lake, not half, not a shared portion, the whole thing. It was clearly marked on the deed, on the county records, on every survey map going back to 1962. Mr. Jennings' family had dug that lake themselves, expanded it over the decades, stocked it with fish, and maintained it completely. When the Ridgemont Estates development was built 15 years ago, the developers wanted to buy the lake. Mr. Jennings refused, so they built around it. Some of the homes in the HOA had views of the lake, and over time, the HOA residents started acting like it was a community amenity. They'd put it in their unofficial brochures. They'd tell new home buyers that lake access was a neighborhood perk. But it wasn't. It was private property. My private property. I spent my first year fixing up the cabin on the land, building a dock, adding a fire pit area, and creating the perfect retreat. I kept to myself. I waved to neighbors. I didn't cause problems. Then I decided to throw a party. It was the 4th of July weekend. I invited about 30 people. Family, friends from college, coworkers, my mama, my cousins from South Carolina. I rented a big smoker, set up tables by the water, bought fireworks that were legal in the county, and even rented a pontoon boat for the kids to ride on the lake. It was going to be perfect. The kind of day I had dreamed about since I was a broke kid staring at other people's happiness. The morning of July 3rd, my guests started arriving. Cars lined up along my private gravel road. Music played from the speakers I'd set up near the dock. My cousin DeAndre was already fishing. My mama was sitting in a lawn chair with her feet in the wire, smiling bigger than I'd ever seen. That's when I first saw her. Walking down the hill from the Ridgemont Estate side, clipboard in hand, visor on her head, sunglasses perched on her nose, was a woman I'd later come to know as Linda Hofstetter, president of the Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association, the HOA Karen to end all HOA Karens. She marched toward my property like she owned every blade of grass under her feet. And she brought 2 other board members with her. I had no idea that this woman was about to try to ruin the best day of my life. The sun was a heavy, golden weight over the valley, the kind of mid-July heat that makes the air shimmer just above the surface of the asphalt. It started out as the definition of a perfect American summer afternoon. You know the vibe. The scent of pine needles baking in the sun, the rhythmic slap-slap of lake water against a wooden dock, in the distant, muffled hum of a lawnmower 3 streets over. I'd lived in this community for 3 years, but I'm a private person. My property is a bit of an anomaly, a beautiful, secluded stretch of shoreline tucked into a quiet cove of the lake. That Saturday, I'd invited 10 of my closest friends over. We had a large floating mat out on the water, a cooler packed with ice and sodas, and a playlist of classic rock humming softly from a Bluetooth speaker. It was the first time in months I felt like I could actually breathe. No emails, no deadlines, just the lake. For the first 3 hours, it was pure bliss. My friend Mark was flipping burgers on a portable grill, and the girls were lounging on the deck, laughing about some old college memory. The water was cool, clear, and felt like silk. It was peaceful. It was exactly what I needed. Until the atmosphere shifted. You know that feeling when the wind suddenly dies down and the birds stop chirping? That's what it felt like when she appeared. I saw her first. She wasn't dressed for the lake. She was wearing a crisp white linen blazer despite the 90-degree heat, oversized designer sunglasses that hid any trace of empathy, and she was clutching a heavy wooden clipboard to her chest like a weapon. She didn't walk down the path, she marched. It was a calculated, authoritative stride, the walk of someone who had spent her entire life speaking to managers. She didn't head toward me, the host. Instead, she went straight for my guests who were waiting in the shallow water. "Excuse me?"
"Excuse me?" she barked. Her voice had this sharp, nasal quality that cut through the music like a saw blade. "You people cannot be here. This is a restricted area." My friends froze. Mark, with a spatula in one hand and a bun in the other, looked at her with genuine confusion. He actually laughed, thinking she was a neighbor playing a prank. "Oh, hey there. We're just having a cookout. Want a burger?" She didn't crack a smile. If anything, her face turned a shade of granite. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at her clipboard, scribbling something furiously. "This isn't a joke, sir. This lake and the surrounding common areas are strictly governed by the Homeowners Association. Unauthorized gatherings of more than 5 individuals are a direct violation of Section 4, Paragraph B of the Community Bylaws. You all need to pack your things and vacate the premises immediately." The music didn't just stop. It felt like the air was sucked out of the cove. My friends looked at each other, then at me. The relaxation was gone, replaced by that awkward, sinking feeling of being in trouble. I set my drink down and stood up. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my heart rate steady. I've dealt with Karens before, but there was something about the absolute certainty in her eyes that was fascinating. She truly believed she owned the ground we were standing on. I walked over, my flip-flops clicking on the stones. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, keeping my voice low and polite. She turned to me, scanning me from head to toe, clearly unimpressed by my board shorts and faded t-shirt. "Yes, there is a significant problem. Your guests are trespassing on association property. This lake is for the exclusive use of registered residents and their immediate families, under strict supervision and within the numerical limits." I looked out at the water, then back at her. "Trespassing? Where exactly?" She pointed a sharp, manicured nail toward the water. "Here. This lake. All of it falls under the jurisdiction of the HOA. I am the chairperson of the grounds committee, and I have not seen a permit application for this event. Since you are in clear violation, I am demanding that you disperse this crowd now." I looked at her clipboard. She had a list of names and house numbers. She was a professional buzzkill. "Who told you this was HOA land?" I asked quietly. She let out a short, condescending laugh. "Who told me? Sir, I have lived in this development since the first stone was laid. I know every inch of these bylaws. I suggest you stop being difficult and start moving, or the consequences will be far more severe than a simple warning." My friends were already starting to drift toward their towels. They didn't want the drama. But as I looked at her smug, self-righteous expression, I realized I wasn't going to let her win this. Not today.
Part 3. The Deed and the Defeat. The cruiser came to a stop, its tires crunching on the gravel. 2 officers stepped out of the vehicle. One was a younger guy, looking bored and hot in his Kevlar vest, and the other was an older sergeant with gray hair at his temples, and a look that said he'd seen everything and didn't want to see any more of it today. Before their boots even hit the grass, Linda was sprinting, well, as much as you can sprint in linen, toward them. "Officers, thank goodness, you took your time. These people have been squatting here for hours. I've asked them to leave repeatedly, but they've been incredibly disrespectful and are refusing to acknowledge the association's authority. I want them removed and cited immediately." The sergeant looked at the group, my friends, who were now standing in a silent semicircle in the water like a bunch of confused seals, and then he looked at me. He walked down the slope, his belt jingling with every step. "All right, let's settle down," the sergeant said, his voice deep and weary. "Who's in charge here?" "I am," I said, stepping forward. Linda pointed a finger at me, nearly poking my eye. "He's the ringleader. He's the one encouraging them to break the law. This is HOA property, and he doesn't have a permit for a gathering of this size. I checked the logs myself." The sergeant looked at me, tilting his hat back. "Is that right, sir? Are you aware of the property boundaries here? This lady says you're on community land." "I am," I said, "very aware. In fact, I'm probably more aware of the boundaries than anyone in this county." I reached into my waterproof bag on the picnic table and pulled out a heavy yellowed manila folder I'd prepared months ago. "I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding about who owns what, and I'd like to clear it up before anyone gets a ticket." I handed the folder to the sergeant.
Inside was a certified copy of the original land deed from the 1970s, along with a recent professional survey and a title insurance policy. The sergeant took his time. He opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. He looked at the map, tracing the lines with his thumb. Then he looked at the stone markers I had placed near the trees, markers that Linda had probably walked past 100 times without realizing they were legal boundaries. "Wait a minute," the sergeant muttered. He looked at his partner. "Dave, check the county plat map on the tablet. Look up the South Cove carve-out." For 3 minutes, nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind in the trees and the muffled crackle of the radio in the police cruiser. Linda stood with her arms crossed, a smug smile still plastered on her face. She was waiting for the gotcha moment. She was waiting for me to be led away in cuffs. The sergeant finally closed the folder and looked at Linda. His expression wasn't one of support. It was one of deep, professional annoyance. "Ma'am," he said, "I think you need to take a look at this." "I don't need to look at anything," she snapped. "I know the bylaws by heart." "The bylaws," the sergeant said firmly, "only apply to land owned by the association. This specific plot, including this cove and 40 feet into the woodline, was never signed over to the HOA when the development was built. It was a private carve-out by the original ranch owner. This gentleman doesn't just live here. He owns the land, the shoreline, and the bottom of the lake in this specific cove. It's an island of private property inside the HOA borders." The color drained from Linda's face so fast it was almost scary. She looked like she was about to faint into the lake. That's impossible. The HOA has always managed the docks. We pay for the weed control." "You manage the docks on the north side," the sergeant corrected her. "This is the South Cove. This is private property, which means, ma'am, you are currently standing in this man's backyard without his permission. And you've called us out here on a Saturday afternoon for a trespassing call on a man who owns the dirt you're standing on." Everything went silent. My friends in the water started to grin. One of them actually let out a small, loud whoop and started splashing again. I looked at Linda. Her clipboard was actually trembling in her hands. I was told I'm the chairperson of... "I don't care if you're the Queen of England," the sergeant interrupted. "You called us out here on a false report. Now, the owner here has the right to press charges for harassment and trespassing if he wants to. Sir, how do you want to handle this?" I looked at Linda. She looked small now. All that authority, all that management power had evaporated. She looked at me, her eyes pleading behind those expensive shades. She was terrified. "I don't want to press charges," I said, and I watched her shoulders drop in relief. "But I do want one thing. I want you to walk back to your house. I want you to go to your computer, and I want you to send an email to the entire HOA board and the community listserv, explaining that this cove is private property and is not to be disturbed again. And then," I added, "I want you to leave us alone. No more clipboards, no more rules, just peace." She didn't say a word. She didn't even look at me. She just nodded, turned around, and began the long walk back up the hill. She didn't march this time.
She shuffled, her heels dragging in the gravel. The sergeant handed me back my folder with a respectful nod. Nice property you got here, sir. Quiet. Sorry for the disturbance. Enjoy your Saturday, and tell your friend to save me a burger next time. As the cruiser pulled away, the music went back on. The volume was a little louder this time.
My friends jumped back into the water, and the laughter returned, even louder than before. About an hour later, I checked my phone. Sure enough, an email notification popped up. It was from the HOA listserv. It was short, humiliated, and perfectly written. Nobody ever questioned who owned the lake again. And about a week later, Linda actually came back, this time without the clipboard, to offer a real, quiet apology. I didn't invite her for a burger, but I did let her walk past without saying a word. It was a perfect summer afternoon, after all.